Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Ross Miner. I'm a blind game accessibility consultant, and welcome to part 1 of my blind accessibility review for Spider-Man 2. Okay, so right off the bat, I will preface this by saying I have been sick for the past week, and so naturally that just limited how much I could play the game and push back when I could release this review. But overall, I figured I didn't need to spend a ton of time on this review in the grand scheme of things, because like I said, it is a part 1. I released kind of a different, more casual video a couple weeks ago, just talking about the Spider-Man accessibility features that were announced. You could check that video out here, but essentially there are a bunch of accessibility features coming later in December, such as audio descriptions, text-to-speech in the game, as well as other accessibility features like closed captions and button remapping. So that's how I'm going to be doing this review, is just giving a general outline of what's doable and what isn't. I'm probably going to jump in it a lot more once all of the accessibility features come out in December, because then we'll kind of know what we're working with, and who knows, maybe there will be some updates by then. One more thing before we jump into the accessibility review is that this is an accessibility review, specifically a blind accessibility review. Other people with disabilities may have a completely different experience with this game, and that's totally okay, but I just want to be completely clear that this is for blind accessibility only. And I'm also not going to be reviewing, the gameplay as a whole, even the game or the story as a whole, because from what I've played, it's already been amazing. If this game was fully accessible, I'd give it a 10 out of 10. The combat is great. The sound design is awesome. The mechanics are great. The story, you get to play as 2 Spider-Mans, double the Spider-Man, double the customization with all the different moves. So none of that is in dispute. I'm not critiquing any of that. I'm sure it's going to be a great game. This is just accessibility, but just wanted to clear that up, and let's jump into it. But yeah, if you couldn't tell by the lack of cinematic or engaging intros that I generally like to go for in my accessibility reviews, it's because, overall this game is not blind accessible. I will just get right ahead of that and say, it is not blind accessible, but please stick around for my explanations as to why, because there are different levels of what gamers are willing to put up with, for example. Also, I almost forgot to mention, huge shout out to PlayStation for the review code for Spider-Man 2. So before we jump into the accessibility and my thoughts on Spider-Man 2, I think it's important to kind of give a context of the past Spider-Man games. So starting with Spider-Man Remastered back in 2018, it did a lot for accessibility. The game was very playable, but obviously there was a ton that could have been worked on. But again, you can't really complain much when a studio is starting out first time with accessibility and kind of put their best foot forward. So you just want to give them the benefit of the doubt. So I was like, all right, great game. Well, then Miles Morales came out at the end of 2020, and again, they took it up a notch, and they added a lot of different blind accessibility features or just accessibility features overall. But again, the main issues that kind of persisted from Spider-Man Remastered was just the navigation assistance overall, because Spider-Man, at least for blind gamers, part of what makes it so easy or easier to play is that you're able to traverse so many obstacles just by jumping or swinging and things like that. There's almost nothing you can't climb over in Spider-Man unless you're indoors, right? And so in theory, it should make navigation more accessible in a way, or more doable, and it does. In the city, in the overworld, it does work great. Traversing things obviously can be improved, but it's kind of part of the reason why blind gamers have had their eyes on this game, pun intended, for so long, because we saw what could be done in Miles Morales, and we were just like, oh wow, it would be so great to really see what they're able to accomplish in 3 years of development on this new game. So there are generally 3 things that I say make a game accessible or playable for blind people, and that is sound cues, text-to-speech, and navigation assistance. Well, all 3 Spider-Man games, including the new one, has navigation assistance, but it's more or less has not been updated since remastered. It points you in the right direction, but that's really about it. It leaves much to be desired, and I'm going to jump headfirst into it in just a second. But then text-to-speech, Insomniac, they've almost got that down. That's coming out in December, so that's great. Well, then sound cues is just another huge pain point for this game. Like I can't even express it. But yeah, so this is pretty much what we're going to be talking about, and then just the basic pros and cons. Okay, so first we're going to talk about navigation assistance in the game, and much like Miles Morales and Spider-Man Remastered, the Nav Assist has not been updated at all from what I can tell, except for a couple things that I'll get into. But as far as like the main, how navigation assistance works, like the main functionality of it, yeah, it has not really improved at all. It's maybe been updated, but it doesn't seem to have been improved because, like I said, it works great in the overworld, navigating from main objective to main objective. But then when you actually get into areas that require even a little bit more precise navigation, it just kind of falls apart. So especially indoors, it's just really, really bad. And I'll let you throw up an example right here of just actually where I stopped playing the game because I just kept getting stuck. And I just could not find any way to progress. And sure, I could have gotten sighted assistance, but I felt like that kind of defeated the spirit of a blind accessibility review because I kind of just want to simulate exactly what you're going to encounter if you have no sighted assistance at all. And there are really just so many other places where the navigation assistance falls apart, because not only does it fall apart indoors, but there are a lot of weird bugs with it. First being that there was a time where I was navigating to my objective and I actually reached the objective, which was on top of a building, but I didn't realize that I had reached the objective, and so I walked off the building and kept looking for my objective. Well, the game recognized that I had made it to where I wanted to go, and so then navigation assistance began taking me somewhere else. And that kind of leads me into, I believe, a new feature of Nav Assist is that you can track side quests with it, which is great because there's a menu that you can pull up of different crimes or different side quests that are going on around the city, and once you select it, the navigation assistance will bring you there. Well, since I technically passed my main objective, it just began bringing me to other locations, and I couldn't figure out how to get it back to the main objective, which was kind of difficult. I pretty much had to restart the checkpoint and just be a lot more careful. So that's definitely something to keep in mind if you do decide to play the game. So that's pretty much it for a general overview of the Nav Assist, but I am gonna keep giving more examples because, as you'll kind of notice, the general theme of this review is navigation. The game has so many accessibility options, and Insomniac, in a lot of ways, in most ways, has hit this game out of the park, or whatever the phrase is. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, they've done an amazing job on this game, but it's just constantly the blind accessibility that just seems to just have been an oversight, an afterthought, whatever you want to call it. It's just doesn't seem to have been given the same amount of detail as the other accessibility features. And that's the thing. It's not that they even haven't given the blind assistance detail, because there's going to be a screen reader, there's going to be audio description, but it's mainly the navigation assistance, which is really important. But before we jump into the sound effects, I wanted to quickly talk about TTS, because obviously it's not in the game yet, and of course it's going to help a bunch with the menus and customizing your character and your loadouts and all of that. I think that's going to be great. But again, like I said, it most likely won't help out with navigation. However, it may be able to help out with button prompts, which is something I really struggled with. But I'm not referring specifically to quick time events. There are settings in the game that will autocomplete those, so they're not an issue for blind gamers, although it would be nice for text-to-speech to read those out so I could complete them independently. Jeez. But I'm mainly referring to points where it just wants you to press a button to proceed with something in the story or to interact with an object. A lot of the times it's just not clear at all. Even from the very beginning of the game when I'm fighting Sandman, I promise you it's not a spoiler, it's like the first 2 minutes of the game. Even when I'm fighting Sandman, I spent, I think, at close to an hour fighting him because I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to do. But I realized that I had to swing his projectiles back at him. But the way that they were coming at me just made it really difficult to know when I was supposed to swing them back, if I was supposed to press triangle, or I was supposed to use LR and, not LR, L1 and R1, because that's the move. And that's the thing, like, it took me an hour to figure all this out, and I had prior knowledge of Spider-Man mechanics and all the button presses. If someone who was blind just played this game, you know, downloaded it, started playing it, they would absolutely hit a brick wall, no questions asked. But that leads into sound effects, and again, I think this is another area where the ball was just dropped and the ball is rolling down the sidewalk, it's rolling away. Like, and I say that because, and this also could be because the bar has been raised since Miles Morales came out. So when Miles Morales came out, I didn't really have this complaint. I wouldn't even, you know, call it a complaint, but I didn't have this request where I wanted, you know, sound cues for certain things in the game. But since The Last of Us and since God of War, who both games made, you know, really clever use of sound cues, I find myself wanting that in the game now and realizing that I could benefit from that a bunch in the game. And partially during combat, yes, it would be really nice to have a sound cue for combat. But otherwise, combat is very doable because, you know, you're very mobile. You can immobilize enemies with webs, and there is a lot of combat accessibility. If it's not strictly when it comes to throwing punches and dodging, but more so there are ways that you can auto heal during combat, or a button that you could press that will heal you, and things like that. Make combat definitely one of the less difficult parts of this game, if not, you know, button mashy. And you know, of course, difficulty is relative. If you're blind, you may not have trouble button mashing, but if you have some sort of fine motor impairment, then yeah, combat's gonna be a lot more difficult, of course. But yeah, sound effects really could go a long way in this game. There are just so many things that we can't interact with as blind gamers because we just don't know that they're there, or we don't have any way to gain access to certain kinds of information, whether it be to interact with something, or when something specific becomes available, or even a new navigation route. Or, you know, in the game you can fly on web wings and you can take air tunnels throughout the city. Well, it'd be nice to have sound effects on those. There's just so many different ways you could implement sound effects that would provide information that could even help with navigation assistance. Like, I'm very surprised that in a game involving tons of vertical navigation and swinging throughout an entire city, that yeah, there's no way to know how high up you are, how high or low you are. There's no way to actually know if you're on a building or on the ground, or just what elevation you're at. And there's no way to navigate throughout the city either, other than the main story. There's no clear purposeful navigation. It's just kind of brute forcing your way into everything and throughout the game. And so it definitely, yeah, the lack of sound cues just make it very tedious, and I find that it takes away from the gameplay experience a lot when I compare it to Last of Us and God of War. That being said, it's not all bad about the sound design and accessibility features overall, because there are a couple new additions in the game that I definitely wanted to highlight. First, like I mentioned in my previous video, there is puzzle assist / skip. Full transparency, I never even got to a puzzle because that's how difficult it was to actually get through an indoor building, for example. But if it's been any indication of what I've experienced with the nav assist, like I said, it feels the exact same as previous games. I expect it, you know, maybe there's an easier puzzle that you may be able to do yourself, but the more difficult ones, nav assist will not help you through. Hopefully skip puzzle, it allows you to, it works properly. But like I said, I never even got that far into the game, just because I didn't, to be totally honest, I just didn't have a ton of time to play and ask for sighted assistance at the same time. Because, you know, it's a lot to kind of coordinate that with someone else. Like, hey, do you have time to play this video game with me? You know, so just didn't work out. But I definitely think I got the full experience. So yeah, puzzle skip exists and hopefully it works. But I wanted to highlight two other features in the game that aren't even strictly accessibility features, in the sense that they're not in the menus, but you can, I have a strong feeling that these were intentional design decisions. And so you have to give credit where credit is due, because, you know, I feel like the majority of this video has been me expressing my dissatisfaction for the game. So just got to give credit where it's due. First being the haptics. So it's actually a pro and a con. So I'll start with the pro. The pro is that there are haptics for when you're walking, and you can actually feel it in the controller, like left, right, and that's really, really cool because you know, just some swinging around through New York and climbing up walls and things like that, it can sometimes be difficult to tell when you're actually walking or on the ground versus like stuck to the side of a wall. So this was a really great addition. But on top of that, the footsteps stop vibrating when you're walking into a wall. So again, ideally, if there were nav assist, it wouldn't be as important. But if you do decide to try to bump your way around the game, that can definitely help a little bit. Another thing about vibration is that there are different modes for vibration. There is experiential, which is all the vibrations, off, which is none, and then functional, which apparently is supposed to give vibrations only for important accessibility events or just vibrations that convey important accessibility info. I'll say right off the bat, I didn't notice any important vibrations. So I think the intention of it was to kind of just turn off all of the haphazard and kind of other vibrations that are constantly felt through the controller, to maybe emphasize things like the footsteps that I mentioned, or you know, there are some accessibility vibrations, like when you discover a photo location in the overworld, you know, you could feel the vibrations and like it points you in the direction of that. So maybe that's what it refers to as functional. But overall, it definitely, yeah, has me scratching my head, at least from a blindness perspective, because I'm like, well, we use as many vibrations as we can get. So what some people may think isn't a useful vibration is for blind people. So I would recommend just keeping this all the way on if you do decide to play the game, because it helped me a lot. The other design decision that I think has really gone a long way is that while there may not be, oops, my phone is talking, while there may not be any strict accessibility sound cues for like, hey, this means this, or hey, this means you need to do this, the dialogue in the game often tells you what you need to do. And so I'm going to quickly play an example right here.
Time for face-to-face.
But as you can see, when Miles says time to get close up, I immediately knew. I was like, okay, I'm probably right in front of Sandman now, like I can start punching. And there are just cases of dialogue indicating when the state of the game or state of combat has changed all throughout the game. And so I think that's a really, really cool detail that Insomniac included. And I think many different game studios can learn from that because, you know, a lot of the times there are different philosophies for how accessibility should be implemented versus have all these sound cues or kind of try to naturally make it as much a part of the design process as possible. So it definitely seems like that's kind of what they're leaning towards and like trying to just integrate it into the world of the game. So it was very, very cool to hear that. So that pretty much wraps up my Spider-Man review. Nice and short, I hope. It didn't take me very long to record this, and things are usually short in my mind and then it's like 20-minute video. But that's my Spider-Man accessibility review. I will hopefully be dropping a more detailed video in December. Hopefully things improve by then. But I am definitely left wondering just kind of what happened. Why does there seem to be so little improvement with blind accessibility? New features have been added, new accessibility features, new blind accessibility features have been added. But none of them address the largest blind accessibility barrier in the game. It kind of just feels like, you know, they kind of threw in like whatever good accessibility idea they had, and they were good. They are good accessibility ideas and they work great in the game, but they don't address the underlying issue at all, which is navigation. I would play this game without audio description, even without text to speech, if the nav assist was just there, because, you know, I played the Spider-Man games when I could see. I love Spider-Man, but just, yeah, not being able to play this game, it's a blow for sure. Just because I always see people talking about these games and 100%ing these games, and I just, you know, open world games is something that blind people do not have a lot of, if any. So it's just another huge missed opportunity, and it's very sad. But 2 months from now, maybe things will have changed. But that being said, thank you all so much for watching this video. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Like, subscribe, blah blah, all that boring stuff. And yeah, keep an eye out for my Forza review because it's taking a little bit longer, but I have some really cool things in store. Thanks guys, talk to you later.